Hi, welcome back to The Brood. This is our second podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm here with Letitia.
Hi.
And Josh.
Hello.
And this week, we are discussing body horror. Body horror is a subgenre of the horror genre that relates to horror that has to do with our physical bodies. Maybe the transformation or the degeneration of our physical bodies. And I have a quote here from Linda Badley's film Horror and the Body Fantastic that I thought was appropriate. It's a description of a Halloween night, 1986, in a small Tennessee town. And I think it kind of makes very clear what body horror is. And the quote, it goes like this. On this night of the spirits, the supernatural was conspicuously absent, the ghosts nowhere in evidence. The text here was not fear of death in any traditional sense, but fear and loathing of life, existence perceived as terminal disease. The haunted house was the human body itself, threatened at every turn, covered with tubes, cannibalized for cells, fluids, tissues, and parts, tortured and reconstructed on the Procrustean bed of biotechnology. Haunted houses are always mazes and pilgrimages. Ours went from womb to tomb. I think that really makes clear this turn inward and a turn toward looking at the body as the site of where horror takes place. And we decided on 3 films that we were going to discuss for this podcast, one being Stuart Gordon's From Beyond, the film Bad Biology by Frank Henenlotter, and In My Skin is a French film from the early 2000s we'll be discussing. And we found that these choices were linked in a way by the fact that these 3 films are very sexual and related to sexuality. So body horror, and more specifically body horror through the lens of the sexual. And Letitia brought up a monologue from David Cronenberg's film Shivers, David Cronenberg, the crown king of body horror. And we thought that was a good way to set the tone as well by her reading that monologue from Shivers. So Letitia, if you would be so kind.
Sure. Roger, I had a very disturbing dream last night. In this dream, I found myself making love to a strange man. Only I'm having trouble, you see, because he's old and dying, and he smells bad, and I find him repulsive. But then he tells me that everything is erotic, that everything is sexual. You know what I mean? He tells me that even old flesh is erotic flesh, that disease is the love of 2 alien kinds of creatures for each other, that even dying is an act of eroticism, that talking is sexual, that breathing is sexual, that even to physically exist is sexual. And I believe him, and we make love beautifully.
Thank you very much. Very, very well performed, Letitia. Thank you so much. And to talk about someone really laying out to a large degree what their work is going to be about in one swoop. I've always really, really loved that part of that film. So I guess first off we should talk about From Beyond, because I think it's a great success and it's a film that has a lot going on by a great filmmaker. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask Josh to present an idea that he told me about before we started, an approach to body horror that he had been formulating. If you wanted to talk about that, Josh.
Sure. Let's see if I can lay it out in the simplest terms. I guess that the more I thought about the 3 films that we were discussing tonight, and kind of the broader, especially Cronenberg's films, that seemed to me that the nature of the horror came from 2 distinct directions. There's kind of 2 takes on it. Basically, the lesson here is that everything about the body is horrible. But that I guess when I think about films like In My Skin and The Beast in Me and Bad Biology, that it's kind of it's Cartesian in its horror. It's this recognition that the body is somehow separate from me. That I'm seeing my body as a foreign object, as something it's objectified. It can become anything then, a sexual object, food, a monster. It could be all these things.
Yeah.
and that's kind of horrifying. And then there's this other more existential vein, which I think actually Cronenberg probably leans toward more often than that. I think From Beyond works this way as well, but certainly The Fly, Videodrome, which is this kind of horror that no, the body really is me, that there isn't that separation, and that quite often changes in the body are reflected in changes in your mind, or vice versa. That quite often in Cronenberg's movies we see psychological changes kind of made flesh and kind of objectified in that way. So it seems to me that I'm just kind of, and I'm still kind of trying to trace this out, but I see kind of two very distinct methods of coming at this kind of terrifying view of the body.
Yeah, damned if you do and damned if you don't. But so yeah, do you want to talk about how that is present in From Beyond? Because yeah, actually that really is a good summation of some ideas I think we were bouncing back and forth in some emails. But yeah, exactly, that Cartesian idea of mind and body, and then this idea of there is no split, and I think that makes possible these kind of explicit manifestations of emotional and psychological things through the body. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. I mean, in From Beyond, and I think we could say the same. That is From Beyond, is all about a transformation, and it's it's an evolution, right? That humanity is going to reach its next level through this, and it takes the form of a physical transformation. The pineal gland is going to be enlarged.
Yeah.
It's finally protruding from your forehead, and it becomes horrible. But and then of course that has all these psychological ramifications on the characters involved. So I guess that complete inability to separate those that transformation, that a transformation on one plane will be a transformation for better or worse on the other.
And actually that bringing up that idea of this next evolution for humankind as body horror, I just made me think of the X-Men. For some reason, I never thought about that. Mutants as a kind of mutants and X-Men as a kind of body horror. Maybe that's something I never really thought about. But yeah, and maybe that there doesn't have to be pain. Okay, so that's something maybe that we can talk about is in body horror and From Beyond, I think is interesting because there is pain involved, but there's also the horror of pleasure. Which I think is very, very interesting. That a lot of the horror comes from this forbidden pleasure or feeling this intense pleasure. Some of Jeffrey Combs' expressions when when that gland comes out of his head, is that what that is? The thing that's coming out of his forehead. He's just in this kind of ecstasy, or it's a pain and an ecstasy, and it's problematic. I think that's very interesting. Did anybody else pick up on that kind of intense pleasure as something horrific?
Well, I think so, and of course that movie is so very gendered in its response too. I mean that Combs gets to kind of experience that quasi-religious kind of pain and ecstasy, whereas the female lead, it affects her in a very different way. She becomes a sexual predator of some kind.
Yeah, I was the movie. Maybe we could back up a little bit because I was a little bit. When I'd never seen it before, and I didn't read any summaries, but the relationship between the machine, the pineal gland, what happens to the body, and it seems like, what is the name of the Dr. Pretorius? Is that his name?
The what?
The doctor in the beginning, Dr. Pretorius, is that his name?
Yeah, I think it is Pretorius. Is that who it is?
Pretorius? I don't know. But so his body is destroyed in our world, right? His head is eaten. His body is dead. But he comes back with this monstrous body that seems to be encouraged. So I'd like a little bit of clarification about what you guys think is the relationship between the body and the mind, because it seems like, as you were saying, there's the activation of the gland is sort of a sexual thing. There's these sort of these desires to have pleasure, but it's very mental. It's very psychological. But then there's some relationship to the body that I'm not clear about what the movie is, and maybe the movie isn't clear.
Is it that is what's going on? Because I'll be honest, as active as a viewer I am, sometimes I do take a certain amount of science for granted, and I just pan out on this. But I think now is it what's going on that there's like another dimension that they can access, and that's where Pretorius is. It's Pretorius now, that where he's coming through when they turn on the machine, and that gland is somehow in a new organ that's developing that allows them to have contact with that dimension, this other dimension. Josh, is that what it is?
Yeah, and of course, I mean, I think plot is so kind of tertiary. I mean, the Lovecraft story this is based on, basically is over by the time the credits, the opening credits have rolled, and then basically it's kind of Gordon just kind of riffing on this stuff for the next hour and a half,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, yeah, the plot seems definitely kind of wishy-washy. It's mostly, I think, an excuse to really kind of play. I mean, that's what I love about this movie is just that it's just absolute kind of just balls out energy. I mean, the way that it just moves, plot be damned, through, through these transformations, just chewing up characters, spitting them out, having them come back. It's just, it's got that Evil Dead kind of energy to it, that kinetic kind of feel.
I think it's maybe Stuart Gordon's best film. I really do think it's in a way I like more than Reanimator because the energy, like you said, it's a film that starts and really does not slow down at all. And that's something but it does it successfully, which isn't always the case. But I do want to say that was your pick, Josh. I think I should state that because and from now on, my pick this week was In My Skin, and Letitia's was Bad Biology. So maybe, but yeah, I think that something interesting about the film is that, especially in the light of the H.P. Lovecraft, to take something Lovecraft, who was, these ideas that this knowledge of the unknown is going to destroy us, like that theme that runs through his work. And to see how that plays out in a different way and from beyond, in that maybe the giving ourselves over to these desires and this pleasure is something that's going to destroy us. Because I was really struck by the scene where Barbara Crampton, who is great, she's under the influence like a junkie of this machine, and she's seducing Ken Foray, and there's so much sexual tension in that scene. That's a really great scene, and I think it's really shows that precipice that Stuart Gordon is working with, that giving yourself over to this desire, this pleasure, substituting that for the unknown, I think is very interesting. But yeah, do we have but I guess let's talk more about how it is related to the body. Well, let's think of it in a frame in the frame of body horror. So we would be saying that this is more a film that falls into the realm of not the Cartesians, but the other, the mind and body as one, and the mind and transformations of the mind being manifested in the flesh.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about, there's this creepy feeling that I get when I listen to, there's all this kind of noise right now with neuroscience and how we're going to map out morality and everything else through chemical reactions, and so much of that just rings to me like body horror. It sounds so much like this is the cautionary. This movie is the cautionary tale, that kind of thing. on the one hand, I really do feel both the horror of both positions here, and that I can reject this Cartesian split that I'm just this mind that happens to be kind of stuck in a body. At the same time, that sounds dreadful to me. That idea that that who I am can be boiled down to my biology.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that this movie, not to really put too much pressure on on what Gordon's doing here, but that's something that I see as a thread. Certainly Cronenberg plays with those ideas a lot. That we are our bodies, and that when weird things happen to our bodies, that it really is that weird things happen to us. And I don't know, there's that opening quote that you read kind of talks, it says, it's not the fear of death, and then talks about the fear of, just that degeneration. And it seems to me that body horror, in a way, always comes back to that fear of death. I mean, that's the original body horror, right? I mean, that we are, kind of in Yeats' words, tied to a dying animal, and and that eventually that's what's going to happen to all of us.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, I'm officially rambling here, but
no, I don't. I really don't think you are, because I think you got at a really good point, which is that body horror, and it's been talked about before, but is, I think, our most contemporary. Well, that, or maybe this kind of torture genre that's developing. But body horror is so contemporary because it isn't ghosts, it isn't the supernatural, it isn't these things that we're thinking are hokey. It is so. It is a grotesque version of things that concern us so deeply, with ideas about, like, anything in a strange way, ideas about healthcare or something like that, or are you going to be able to go to a doctor or something like that. In a way, I mean, we have that's on our minds so much that I feel like body horror is still a very, very contemporary idea. It's a horror for right now. I don't, in Ghosts and Frankenstein and whatnot, or not, even though maybe Frankenstein is a kind of body horror. I think that is very true. But yeah, I wanted to ask, but I thought you brought up something interesting, Letitia, about that it was a very gendered, there's a gender split in the effects of this machine, and I thought that was interesting. I wanted to know if you could speak more about that.
Well, yeah, I did find it interesting. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it, I guess, but the woman's response is to put on the leather and try to seduce. But there's no physical. She doesn't change physically, and I think I might have tuned out in the moment when the other character, I don't know his name, begins to change physically, and I kept wondering, why is her response different than his? But it seems to me that it goes back to what this movie seems to be afraid of, which is not so much the body as the mind. To me, the movie seems to be saying, do not give in to what your mind says you want, or maybe you want, maybe your body too. I don't know, but don't give in to what you want. Basically, it's sort of a Puritan message, like, don't do what feels good; it'll make you a monster. Because when Pretorius shows up, I kept thinking, shit, this sounds good. Why not go to this plane of existence? It doesn't really sound like such a bad thing. And when she gets her leather on, why not? I mean, it just didn't seem. I was thinking, well, what is the problem that the movie is? What is the problem with this giving in?
I think that's actually one of the strengths of the movie. Actually, one of the best is that's something that is so fun and so fast. I had a lot of the same feelings. It brought a very clear question to my mind, which is a very contemporary question. Josh was talking about neuroscience, but also what these kind of ideas that are floating around now about, like, transcending and, let's put our minds on a hard drive and, that kind of thing. And in a sense, it's raising that question, like, what's so bad about that? What's holding us back from something like that? What's holding us back from something like moving to this other plane, like you were saying? And I think it is this. I don't know. It's posing a great question, and I think it is by these possibilities opening up of this transcendence, or bringing up these ideas of, can we move to another plane? It is bringing into relief the fact that we hold on to something that is, not tangible, something ephemerally human, in a way. I think that's what it's bringing out for us to see, because that's what I feel.
The idea is that we lose something human if we were to.
I think so. I think the idea is that we lose something that makes us human if we go to become this other form in this other place. And I mean, because we lose our physical, I guess we lose our physical body, and as much as the body is the location of the horror, it's also what we feel makes us, in a lot of ways, who we are. Mm. I don't know. I think that's very interesting.
To kind of build off of that for a second, but the other thing that makes this particular story interesting is that it does have this interdimensional aspect to it.
Yeah.
And so the kind of conceit is that kind of what you're describing as the human condition is really a kind of blindness, that we're simply due to our it's more about perception. It's that we don't recognize that there's these things surrounding us, those wonderful little eels things kind of surrounding us all the time. It's not a matter of changing reality, it's more a question of perceiving reality, and that if we through these slight alterations of our perception, then we have a fuller understanding of the universe or whatever. That and again, it just, to me, it's that even a change in perception then becomes a bodily change, right? Mm-hmm. Simply by recognizing these other layers of the universe, all of a sudden these grotesque things begin to happen to us. That if we think about Videodrome, a classic body horror Cronenberg film, I would say that hooks up very, very clearly with the kind of what's going on in that movie. That kind of what we see and the kind of things that we take in perceptually have this dramatic bodily effect on us.
Man, that's even more sinister now that I think about it. Just like, yeah, just this kind of, stepping to the side, this parallax view or whatever it may be for a moment of, the same world that you see, that there is this other thing there, and just that, that change in perspective can be, affect you and be a sort of body horror in a sense, just because this realization of what, maybe we're not even talking about body horror, maybe, but I mean like that is the horror of realizing this other perspective. I mean, if we could kind of extrapolate from there, kind of a very deep kind of psychological horror of trying to see from someone else's perspective. I think the first time we talked about the other, but that horror that's inherent in the idea of this other thing's perspective, this other way of looking, this other way of seeing what is there, but what we deny, so that we can live, so that we can go from day to day. I just recently rewatched They Live, and to look at They Live in that frame, I think is John Carpenter's They Live, I think is very, very appropriate. I mean, he quite explicitly puts on glasses and sees things, differently, that were there all along. So I think that fits really well into what you were talking about, Josh.
Well, that makes me think again of the question, is a lot of horror inherently conservative in its positioning? Because of this fear of seeing from another perspective, of of having some radical shift in your daily life and the whole movie is like trying to fight to keep hold of this normal human perspective. We're talking about from beyond now, but
yeah, no, that's true though. But I think the interesting thing is that Gordon opens up to let us see that it's not all bad. And I think that's what makes the movie interesting, that it's not, you can see that there is a kind of freedom, and there are, good points.
Yeah. Well,
and the whole entertainment value of the film stakes itself on that claim. I mean,
yeah.
that's what we're sitting down for, is to take that ride.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
yeah, and I think Letitia, your question, which I think you raised last time,
Mhm.
about the how conservative a lot of horror is. I think Bad Biology just rides that to the extreme. I mean, I found that
Oh, do you
that
want to
film.
shift? Do you want to shift gears into Bad Biology now?
It sounded like a transition to me.
Do we dare? It sounds great to me.
Uh, it just seemed to me that, and just to kind of lay it out, this is an explicitly sexual film about, which I think kind of rides that Cartesian line a lot heavier, where the kind of the sexual yeah the sexual organs are actually disembodied at points, right?
Yeah.
But
Let's give a brief because I feel like people might be more familiar with From Beyond. Should we give just a very brief account of what Bad Biology?
I'd love to hear you give a brief account.
That movie had a lot, that really suffered from a little too much going on. If I could, because I'll be honest, I'm a fan of Frank Henenlotter, the director. I like his films a lot. And I think he has almost exclusively dealt with body horror in his own ridiculous fashion, but this was just a misfire, I thought. But anyway, it's a young woman. I believe she's born with what, seven
Yeah.
clitorises, and she it's when she has sex with men. Well, she has like a greater like sexual appetite because of that, and like she wants to have sex more often. But when she does, though, she gets so enthusiastic that she ends up killing her partner sometimes. But her metabolism is faster than a normal person's as well, so she gives birth to these children 2 hours after having sex. These, I don't know, mutant babies. At the same time, there's another character, a man who somehow lost his penis at a certain point, so he began, I guess, when he was younger, injecting steroids into what was left of his genitalia to make his penis grow bigger, but these steroids caused his penis to have its own consciousness and be drug addicted, so he has to inject drugs into his penis. I think actually this description makes it sound a lot better than I actually thought it was.
It's a lot more entertaining than the movie.
Inject these drugs in his penis, it gets its own consciousness. Anyway, somehow, through some convoluted reason, they need to get together, and she wants to have sex with this guy with this giant mutant penis because it's the only thing that will satisfy her. And then there you go. That's Bad Biology. And it seemingly could, I don't think any concept in itself is bad, but I think the execution was something that didn't speak to me really. But yeah, so you were talking about how that this is much more explicitly this Cartesian split, Bad Biology.
Well, yeah, and I think much more explicitly conservative. I mean, it sounds like something out of the current Republican platform. I mean, this kind of explicit fear of female sexual pleasure, that leads to murder, to the careless depositing of the results of these sexual escapades, right? She's just kind of dumping kids in garbage cans right and left. I guess that I actually did have some problems with some of the ideas ahead of the execution, that it was because I felt like that was supposed to be a source of horror. Just that setup itself was supposed to be something terrible.
Oh, so it's like almost like a hyperactive version of what, maybe some more conservative people would see as like the cycle of, poverty or whatever, and having too many children, the abortion, all these issues that the right takes issue with, maybe someone more conservative, I shouldn't phrase it like that, takes issue with at this hyperactive level. like she's going through this cycle. Is
Well,
that what you were?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is that what you were seeing, Josh?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the idea, though, that if a woman were to have an extremely large sex drive, clearly she would kill men and throw her babies in the trash and terrorize men with her alluring. Yeah, I mean, that was a big problem for me in the beginning.
I think that it's strange, though, because at a certain point she could have been a very empowering character.
Oh, yeah.
If there was, and I think the only way that maybe she would be empowering is, I'm trying to think. I don't think she showed any shame about her desires, but I think whereas that could have been something positive, it was turned into the fact that she's kind of crazy. You know what I mean? That's how it was played out, was that she's been driven mad by this in some way, or she's totally immoral in any recognizable way.
Dare we say hysterical?
Yeah.
I mean, it really, I felt like this movie was, it was kind of an assault. I mean, even the male character is, I mean, this is like the most anti-feminist film that I could come up with right now. The male character is kind of the cartoon of the anti-feminist view as well. He's kind of, he does show shame, but that's just because he shows shame that he's completely out of control of his own virility, right? Like he has to, sex with him is also a violent act that's beyond his control, which is that particular view of masculinity as well. But and they're just kind of put on the stage and allowed to run rampant and pile up bodies. And
it quite literally does run rampant at one point. And what I believe, I guess, was supposed to be the payoff. By that time, I was groaning quite loudly in my apartment. But I think it is interesting. I think the film did attempt to, have this kind of. I think it was a very, but strangely, I think it might have been a very misguided attempt at something that was empowering women, or something that was relatable for women, because every man in this film is depicted as a degenerate, like terrible person. I don't know. Could you see that? Could you see it as maybe a misguided attempt at that? We can't suppose what they were trying to do, but
I think it was supposed to be funnier, and that somehow the humor would have made would have made us see the ridiculous. I think that it was supposed to be funny. So
yeah.
And so that failing so badly, I think, maybe changed the tone, or made these parts of it that weren't supposed to be quite so forefronted, or something went wrong. Is all I can explain.
I guess I guess let's look at it through the frame of body horror again, and more, I guess, specifically the sexual aspect of body horror. Like, okay, so these people's sexual excess, to a degree, or makes them freaks in some way, and because of this, they are. The result is people have to die.
It made me think of Shivers so much in that way.
Really?
Only Shivers is really good, and and like, but this idea that it's Shivers is, I always think of it as like the sex zombie movie. Like, you become sort of a zombie to your sexuality. Like, and in the end, it seems like someone, the main character dies by pool orgy. Basically, is what seems to be happening, and that doesn't seem like such a bad way to go. And with Nurse Forsythe's, monologue, it feels to me a more nuanced way to talk about the appetite, the sexual appetite, as something both horrifying, but also something that we have to come to grips with, like we have to with death, and we have to with our bodies. That these things are tied together, and we can't try to sort of extricate any one thing. And
yeah,
you know what I mean. So to me, it seemed like there was a similar thing trying to happen.
I agree. I think that so Cronenberg gives us the grown-up version of this, and we get the quite literally adolescent version of it.
Yeah.
Because I think that this really is. I think that what we're seeing in Bad Biology is an adolescent horror at sexuality. I mean, that, going back to, it makes me think of, a lot of the werewolf films, from, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, which makes it, to Ginger Snaps or something that makes these things pretty explicit. That the awakening to adolescent sexuality can be terrifying. And especially when you don't have a kind of a clear guide through that. Mm-hmm. And but this movie seems kind of locked into that same kind of view that we've got ostensibly adult characters here who still view sexuality only as something terrifying or threatening.
And I think maybe that's the major difference with Shivers. Is Shivers uses our own fears and kind of taboos about sex to scare us by showing them to us in a certain way. But something like Bad Biology is itself afraid of sex and is itself afraid of those things, maybe to a degree, and that's why it approaches them the way it does. Whereas I think Cronenberg's down with anything. I imagine he's the kind of guy that just wants to, he's down to party. But I mean, I think he uses our things that make us, bristle a little bit and shows them to us. But he is always very comfortable, with what he is presenting. And that's what something I've always thought was really interesting about Shivers, because I think it does bring out where kind of to a degree where you stand with, your, I don't know, what do we want to call it? As kind of your sexual politics, like in a way. Bad Biology, on the other hand, I can't think of anything clever and mean enough to say about it. But anyway, I don't know. But I do like his other films, Frankenhooker and the Basket Case films and Brain Damage. I think
I haven't seen any of these.
Frankenhooker is maybe if I went back and watched it now, I wouldn't. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not what I thought it was. Have you seen? Are you familiar with any of those, Josh?
I know Basket Case, which is just silly fun, but
yeah. And I think that is a lot more successful, but yeah, I think so. Bad Biology attempted to be fun and failed. From Beyond succeeded greatly at being fun. Now we have In My Skin,
the most fun of the bunch, I should say. Yeah.
And this was, and to be really forthcoming, this was a film I saw several years ago. It left a deep impression on me. I was unable to rewatch it before the podcast, so I wanted to kind of let you two talk about it and what you thought of it, because this was my pick, and I thought it was a good very, for lack of a better word, realistic, or like, in some sense, it's not supernatural, it's not fantastical in a normal sense of that, word, kind of body horror, the closest I could find or think of. What was your take on the film, either of you, Josh or Letitia?
I adored this movie. I thought it was fantastic, but it's kind of my kind of movie, so but I thought it was successful in what it was trying to do. So I'm interested to hear what Josh has to think of it.
Yeah, where does this fall in your split, Josh?
I think this is probably the most clearly kind of Cartesian. That this is the this is the character viewing her body as absolutely alien. It's she doesn't feel pain. Again, to kind of summarize the plot, she receives this injury that she doesn't get treated. It kind of festers and gets nasty, and she discovers how much she enjoys playing with it, and then proceeds to move on to more self-harm, ending up in outrageous amounts of self-damage, and kind of fetishizing of the body. But I mean, just that complete connection. One of the strangest things about the movie was how I never really noticed pain anywhere, and I think that's come up earlier tonight as well. That for all the things that I was feeling physically unwell during portions of the movie. It had a genuinely bodily effect on me. I was experiencing my own body horror. but the character does not seem to experience pain. The terrible things that she's doing are either expressed as pleasure or as almost just curiosity. So yeah, I would say this falls as far to that side as I can. I mean, down to cannibalism. Once you get to self-cannibalism, I mean, I think that you've made that mind-body split pretty completely.
Yeah, and certified your place in cinema history as well. So, but I think that you're right. I think that is the self-cannibalism, but at the same time, to think about that it's a very, very clear this split. But at the same time, our horror, does it come from the fact that we feel so inextricably linked to our body? To see someone so distant from their physical form and able to do these kind of things to themselves, we shudder at that because maybe that does seem unnatural.
I think it's Cartesian horror. I think is what it is. It's when you when you actually it's like taking, okay, Descartes, let's see what that looks like, and it looks pretty terrifying, when if it really is just this machine that our brains are riding around on. That looks pretty horrific from where I'm sitting.
And the movie is so French. It's so idea-y.
Yeah, if it's followed to its furthest end, it becomes. You sent me an interesting interview by her, and she does talk about this split and this otherness, and you had told me you had shared a story with me, Letitia, about your having an injury and having a kind of response to it that was. That maybe a lot of us have, to all of a sudden your body feels, like it's in these moments of trauma, like it's not yours,
Yeah. That's what the movie, it really made me think about how in times of trauma you kind of have to separate from the body because it's too much. It's too much to see it happening in certain ways. And so the movie takes that. And there's that great scene where she's at but I also think the movie is doing something with her job and her everyday life and her body in the end, because the scene where she's at the dinner table for the business meeting and she sees her arm and her hand, right? Do you guys remember this part? And it's disembodied. It's literally disembodied. And that's when she kind of really gets going with the cannibalism part. She goes to the hotel room as if, her body's her lover, and she kind of consumes herself. And so anyway, I got a little off track, but this really made me think of when I had my major injury. I broke my arm in half, basically.
Oh my God.
And it was very bad, but I remember seeing it all backwards and looking at it and thinking, this is like from a horror movie. It's something really, and for a minute, I could not feel anything. So it was just interesting. And I think there's something pleasurable about that. Being in that space where your body isn't quite so immediate, where you can look at it and see it as an object.
Maybe that's that perspective shift that Josh is talking about.
Yeah, and it's terrifying because at that point you can do anything to it. You can destroy yourself, and it doesn't matter because you don't see your body as being yours. And so that's the horror there. But it's also the pleasure, kind of.
Josh, did you have something?
Well, I was a film that I've never been able to bring myself to watch, but is probably less traumatic than this movie, is a documentary called Sicko. Which I think would make a perfect bookend to this movie. But kind of to build off of what Letitia's saying there, that there is something almost empowering. I mean, that's that guy's gig, is that his body is a source of constant pain and suffering, and he's out of control, so he inflicts pain upon himself, as a way to control his body. If that's not body horror, I don't know what is. But
wait a minute, are we Sicko? We're not talking about. This is not the Michael Moore movie.
No.
Okay, I'm not. I don't think I'm familiar with the film that you're talking about.
And hopefully I have the title right. But no, this is quite a bit older than that. But no, this is he's kind of a performance artist kind of.
Okay.
And a guy, and he's suffering from some debilitating disease, and
okay.
And so, we get to witness him driving nails, things like that. But, but I mean, it seems to me that that's kind of the the flip side of this movie. This that kind of control, I guess, is what Letitia made me think of there. Is that kind of empowering, like, oh, okay, that's happening over there. Like taking solace in that Cartesian. I'm sorry, it's called Sick. It's my assistant has just helped me out. Yeah, the movie is called Sick.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, okay. Yeah, because you mentioned before, I'm like, okay, yeah, Sicko. I'm like, Michael Moore's Sicko. I can see how that's body horror. I'm like, okay, we're all, we want to be healthy, But no, I am. But so he's a performance artist that's purposely inflicting harm on himself. The film you're talking about, Josh.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us too far on a tangent there, but.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I was thinking that also the movie made me think of things that we do to try to connect with our bodies or to feel them more fully. Like, for example, I do a lot of tattooing. Right? I have a lot of tattoos. And for me, that's always a great thing because I feel like I'm right here. I'm having a lot of pain right now. And it's just enough that you can stay with it, but it's not so much that you're, in a hospital. And it's so it's this character trying to experience her body and in an extreme way, but it was something I actually could find fairly relatable. The idea of trying to connect with what's physically happening, to look at your blood and your muscles and to maybe try to feel something. But though it seemed like there was this point where she didn't have feelings, well, she couldn't feel pain, but we really didn't know. There wasn't any comment.
Yeah.
I guess I see a difference between what you're describing and what I saw in the movie.
Go ahead, Josh.
It seemed to be less about her sensation, less about what she's feeling than more about what she's doing. So to take the tattoo metaphor, it's more about the tattoo than the act of getting it, than the pain. At one point she goes and buys a camera. The movie plays with mirrors a lot. What she's really interested in, I think, is her body, is seeing her body, is the visual and what she's doing to herself. And I think the movie plays with the idea of pornography quite a lot. I mean, the character in the film seems less concerned with sensation, with feeling, than with something else, with quite, again, coming back to perception again, with viewing her body going through these things. She buys a camera at one point so that she can film herself, so she can take pictures of the damage that she's doing to herself. There's a lot of playing with mirrors in the movie, and I think the movie plays a lot with the idea of pornography as a corollary here, right down to what it has to be the most disturbing money shot I've ever seen, as she's chewing on her own kneecap. But so.
I think that the film maybe has, there's some clear ideas, but there's also some problematic things going on, because she's trying to have this ultimate almost objectivity of her body objectified, this, kind of Cartesian split that we've been talking about, and to have this objective view of herself. But at the same time, because she's experienced that perspective shift and her body's become other to her, she has to re-internalize it. And maybe that's what the cannibalism is, trying to get that back. Now that she's had that perspective shift, how does she link herself back to her physical form again? Maybe that's what that is about. That's the only way I can reconcile it, really.
Yeah, I think Josh hit on something that's absolutely true. That it is objectivity. It is looking and viewing, and but I think what you're hitting on is what I kind of notice is this trying to get it back, trying to get the body back to her own possession, to be her own thing again. But there is this thing about the pornography, and in a moment, the sound is very pornographic. The way she was sort of hunched, especially that knee, the scene with the leg and the blood spraying on her face, and that seemed very explicitly to me to be echoing, pornography and the sort of tropes of, the money shot. That's exactly the thought I had when that happened. And the whole sound of and she's going to this hotel room, and then there's the cameras, and so I think that you're right. It's very it's not clear, and I think it's purposefully not clear. I don't think it's trying to be a straight up. Uh, I don't think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean. But I think
I
it's playing with these ideas, and I don't know in the end. I mean, how did you feel about the ending? What did you think was what was the sort of trajectory, and where did she end up?
Well, it's kind of funny because the last shot, is just kind of this long kind of the camera just kind of pulls back, and all we're left with is just an image of her body, and with no dialogue. There's not a lot of dialogue in the movie actually,
Yeah.
and I don't know, almost a sense that it almost appears as if it's just something hollow at that point. That's kind of how I was left. That's what she's become at that point, is nothing but this kind of body.
Hmm.
I don't know, what did you make of that?
Yeah, Letitia, what did you think of it?
I thought the ending was interesting because, I mean, where is she looking? I'm trying to remember. It seems like she's looking at, like the gaze is very much at the viewer, is
Yes.
from what I remember. And so it's a little confrontational. I didn't see it as hollow. It seemed almost sort of like, here it is. This is what I've done. What are you going to do about it? Like it didn't seem to me that the movie was making this to be a tragic move from.
Here's where I sensed the tragic move, and I this is not a movie that I can say I enjoyed in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have some issues with it, but part of it is that the main character does seem so kind of emotionally distant. I had trouble connecting with her.
Mm-hmm.
Her interactions with other people don't make her particularly likable or
Yeah.
But there's a scene that stuck with me that I think is probably stuck in my mind as the most revelatory in terms of her emotional state, and that has nothing to do with where she's damaging herself, but she goes into like the pharmacy, and she's got this strip of skin that she's removed, and she's trying to find a way to preserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And she has this bizarre little conversation with the pharmacist there, as he's trying to help her, and because she keeps these little trophies that she saved inevitably wither up and die, and that's the most emotional we see her in the film, is at those moments of realization, and that I don't know, it seems like we come back again, that, like I said earlier, all body horror is eventually fear of death. That she's objectified herself to this degree that she is, her body has become the center of her universe, and it's fading. She can't hold on to it.
It's like almost, but it's like the death of a pet, almost in a way, which is strange. I think because I remember that as well, and it's that even when you are totally detached from, seemingly from your physical form and viewing it that way, something is going to come to an end. And I think, and again, just to, maybe so we can circle back around, kind of wrap things up. I mean, a lot of, and in that end is the unknown, and that I think is the, what's at the base of a lot, of horror a lot of the time, is that unknown, and body horror is bringing us, closer to that, to death, to death, to approaching the unknown, and body horrors are just a particularly horrific way of getting to that end, I think. But I mean, that'd be reducing it to a lot less than it really is. But yeah, maybe that's a little too. I don't know.
I mean, I think In My Skin works very, very effectively in a way that a lot of horror films don't, in actually producing genuine feelings of horror. I mean, that's not something that I experienced. Kind of the opposite of Letitia's example. I had years where every time I would get blood drawn, I would pass out cold. And it's pure psychosomatic response. It's just again, fluid that should be inside my body is not, and my brain would just shut down. And I felt a lot of that same kind of experience watching this film. I felt, I mean, I won't lie to you, I felt lightheaded at times,
Oh,
where
God,
it was.
I feel responsible. I feel terrible.
But
I
mean,
caused you body horror.
No, but I mean, it's kind of like I said, it's like genuine horror because obviously we've all seen plenty of blood and gore on the screen, and so what I was responding to there was not the blood or the gore, but the kind of psychological implications of that particular blood and gore. Just the pure wrongness of it. Really,
and maybe
effective.
kind of, and I think it is affecting. And she, like you said, is not an easy character to get with, but in a sense, maybe she is kind of blank in a sense, so you can have that experience like in a more kind of Brechtian type, way to relate to her, and maybe that's what's going on there. But I think that I think it is a film that is very much. It's an interesting that a film that's so much about ideas could cause that kind of that seeming. I mean, it is also about a very visceral kind of horror that you're experiencing, but I think a lot of that, like you said, is through these ideas of what's happening, what's going on. I think that we've kind of reached the end of the road here for this episode of Body Horror, but I think we really a lot of really interesting ideas were bounced around, and I think we can heartily recommend From Beyond, and I think we can recommend In My Skin to those with a strong stomach.
Yeah.
and Bad Biology,
Not so much.
But I mean, but I think it's a good example because it shows that there can be great things that deal with the similar ideas can be wonderful, and they can also be not so wonderful sometimes. But yeah, I really enjoyed discussing this with you guys, and I'm excited for next time. Any parting words, Josh or Letitia?
Parting words. Wait, should I close with a quote?
Yeah, you can close with a quote. Yeah.
All right. I have this great one of my favorite American poets, George Oppen, has this great. It's a wartime poem, and he has a line that says, "Anything can happen to a body like a brick, and all horror came from this." And I guess that to take all the highfalutin ideas and kind of boil them down to a pretty simple, straightforward statement that does it pretty well. That one way or the other, that's what we're all kind of. That's what a lot of this circles around, is just that the horror of our own embodiedness, I guess.
Absolutely, that's great. Thank you so much. We will be back with our next episode very soon. So I want to thank you guys very much, Josh and Letitia.
Thank you.
Thank you.